Welcome to Leaders and Loggers, the podcast that quenches your thirst for leadership knowledge one pint at a time. Grab your favorite brew, sit back, and join us as we raise a glass to the world of leadership. I'm your host, Kevin Dawson, and each week we'll bring you refreshing conversations with leadership experts from around the globe. We'll dive into the minds of CEOs, thought leaders, and change makers, sipping on the secrets of their success. From the boardroom to the brewery, our guests share their unique perspectives on what it takes to lead in today's ever-changing world. Well, welcome to the Leaders and Loggers podcast. I am your host, Kevin Dawson, and today I am joined by my friend, Amanda Ludwig, who is a transformative CFO, award-winning entrepreneur, speaker, trainer, certified pro advisor. And I always laugh because you've got that panda on your LinkedIn profile. And you'll have to kind of tell me about that later. But Amanda, welcome to the Leaders and Loggers podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. And I can't wait to tell you about the panda. It's a great story.
Well, as we do on every episode, we have a new beer today. And to be part of the season, I have from Shipyard Brewing in Portland, Maine, the Pumpkinhead, which is a wheat ale, an American wheat ale, Pumpkinhead.
I am so excited because I have been there. That's so crazy. I mean, Maine's my home state, but I've actually been there. That's absolutely spectacular.
See, I knew you were coming on the podcast, and I had to find a Maine beer.
Oh, that's really exciting. Well, thank you for that. And what is your, should I ask you, what is your on this Maine beer?
So I'm not a big pumpkin person.
Okay.
Like pumpkin pie, that's about it. And this has just it has that undertone of that pumpkin flavor. It has a little bit more of the wheat on it. It's definitely one that I probably won't order.
Fair enough.
But I mean, you got to live a little.
Well, you were welcoming to me and you're in the fall spirit. So I feel like even if it's not your favorite, you've done a good thing today.
Yeah. I mean, I'll drink it. It's not something that I'll order though.
Fair enough. Well, and because I'm in Virginia, I found this Potter's Craft cider because I'm a cider gal. I'm not so much a beer gal, except for when I eat Indian food. Indian food makes me want to chug a whole pitcher of beer. I haven't figured out the connection, but I cannot have Indian food without beer. But this is a strawberry ginger cider, and I've never tried anything that was a cider that also had a berry. I usually like very traditional cider, but I love ginger, so I'm excited about that.
That sounds actually really good.
Yeah, not particularly fall-esque. It sounds a little summery, but I'm pretty excited about it.
Well, it's still summer in Texas, so
it isn't. Is it always summer in Texas?
Yeah, we've got 12 seasons of summer.
Yes. Well, and so for your listeners, I met Kevin in Texas, and it was 110 degrees, and I don't know how many times. Well, I guess we only had to go back and forth a few times, but it was supposedly a 7-minute walk from where I was staying to where I was going. And I think 3 times I got an Uber because it was 110 and I couldn't handle it.
That's fair.
So the Uber driver pulls up, takes me around the block and drops me off. And I'll admit it. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't do the 110.
It's I mean, once you get over 100, there's nobody can say, yeah, you just get used to it. You don't get used to it over 100 degrees. I don't get used to it. It's just miserable.
It's pretty brutal. It was pretty brutal. But, on the flip side, since you're drinking a Maine beer, I think once it gets below 30, anything below 30 is just cold and there's no way, and really 10 or -10, I can't feel the difference. Growing up in Maine, I couldn't tell you the difference. It's just cold. At that point, it's just, yeah. So yeah. I love the heat thing.
Yeah.
Try this ginger.
And a Brooklyn brewery glass.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't have a glass from this place, but some really nice folks, when I owned an Airbnb, They went to Brooklyn and they brought this back for me, and they donated it to the Airbnb. So I've kept it ever since then because it's a good glass.
Yeah.
Good glass is important.
Of course. So
Yeah.
how's your cider?
I honestly, I don't taste the berry, which I'm okay with because it does taste very much like a traditional cider, but I do taste the hint of ginger, and I love ginger.
I like ginger, and I like a good ginger beer, not ginger ale, but true ginger beer.
Ginger beer, yes. There's one, oh, I wish I knew the name of it. I had to stop buying it because a good ginger beer does have some sugar content. And I would drink like 3 of them in a day. And I was like, that's like, you have a drinking problem with ginger beer. Like I was drinking so much ginger beer. And it was, oh, but it was so good. And part of my health journey, which we'll talk about, but I learned that ginger is really great for nausea. That's why we have ginger ale and like saltine crackers when we're sick, right? So I realized that I was like becoming dependent on ginger beer because I was like, I got to back off the ginger beer. So yeah, but I put fresh ginger in my morning juice every day. I put fresh ginger, spectacular. A little bit of ginger, some orange juice, and some other fruits in there. I also put some of my medications in there so I don't have to take as many in pill form, and just blend it all up. And that ginger, it just takes the flavor of anything that's bad and makes it good. Ginger is spectacular.
I love ginger.
Sorry, you're not here today to talk about ginger.
Yeah, I know.
I get excited about ginger, and I get excited about telling people like, hey, if you don't feel so hot in the morning, toss a little ginger in there and you'll feel great.
And just rub some ginger on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Amanda, I know your story. I would love for my audience to know your story. So would you mind just sharing kind of the journey you've been on for a while now?
Yeah, it has. Unfortunately, it's been longer than I had anticipated, but kind of try to give it in a bit of chronological order. So my history, I launched multiple companies over the years, most recently a business advisory firm, really leaning into the accounting space. I love the numbers. I love the story that's told in the financial statements. And I found I had a gift for that, like reading through them and telling the story in a way that business owners and even CFOs, sometimes I'm not the outsourced CFO, sometimes I'm coaching CFOs, and being able to help them interpret data that is seemingly a little dull, right? Like accountants aren't really known for having the most exciting job in the world. It was exciting when I could see the story that was being told in the numbers and then interpret it and then help transform the company based on that story that maybe they just weren't seeing in that data, and then teaching them how to do that themselves. So I love that kind of work. It's super nerdy, but it's so much fun, right? So I saw a lot of success in that world and in the companies before, but that's just the most recent. I loved what I was doing. I loved clients. I loved my team. And I loved the company transformation, to be able to come in and make that happen. Except for I maybe loved it a little bit too much. In that, I realized, and it's more hindsight than anything, but the amount of time I was putting into that business, into putting into those clients, into investing in my team, the damage that it was doing to me personally. That for someone who thought they were really smart, in hindsight, I'm like, you're not real bright with that, Amanda. I mean, you just kind of missed this piece, because when you're in it, right? And when you're a go-getter, when you're a high achiever, when you're driven, when you've got that fire, those are all traits that are really commendable in our society. But what we don't talk a lot about is the damage that it can do. And so I lived that. I mean, my social life, I didn't actually realize that I didn't really have one. My neighbor would call me from across the street. She could see my car in the driveway on a Saturday night, and she'd be like, she had this great like outdoor layout. She calls it the outdoor living room, and it really is just a great space. She would cook, people would be over, and she would call and be like, I can see that you're home, come over. But on a Saturday night, I was like, but I got to finish this, and I got to do this because tomorrow I have to do that because on Monday we're doing it. Like, that was my life. That's what I was doing. And yes, I saw the success, and yes, I helped companies, and yes, I nurtured my team. But I missed so much in that time, just from a wellness standpoint, from a happiness standpoint. I was so busy, I didn't even notice that I wasn't happy, which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
I think that's insane. That's absolute insanity. But I just didn't notice so many things that were happening in my life or not happening in my life until I got to the point where I had no choice but to notice, because I wound up with a really bizarre illness that took over my whole life. I mean, like, when I say took over my life, we're talking neurological issues, cognitive issues. I was having dizzy spells, I was blacking out, my speech would be slurred. I mean, it got to be so extreme. And when I started having days that I couldn't walk, I still would find a way to get to work. I would set my alarm for 2 hours earlier, and I would take the medicine, and I would give myself that motivational speech. We're going to do this today. You're going to make it happen. This is who you are. You got this. You've got the strength. You're going to do it. And I would go out there and make things happen and hide what I was dealing with. So I wound up having to sell the company that I worked so hard for. And really, that's launched me into, now that I've been in treatment for 14 months, and really making so much progress from where I was in that time of learning, studying, growing as a person, having some mentors, coaches, working with people who helped me identify what was going on in my own life and giving me ways out, and me finding information or me trying things out. I'm now so focused on getting that information to the people who are in the position that I was in, where they don't even realize that their life isn't everything that they envisioned it to be. So that's the short version, believe it or not, of the transition from, thinking I was this boss lady CFO to really hitting rock bottom, to getting to the point where some days I couldn't walk, I couldn't drive, I couldn't speak. And now wanting to share that information to people as an encouragement that doesn't have to be your life. There's a different way, there's a better way, and it is possible. And so thank you so much for having me to share that with other people, because I know there are people who are living the life I led, and it breaks my heart.
So personally for me, I kind of went through something very similar, not to the extreme where I'm having to deal with a bunch of stuff, but there was several years ago where is kind of starting off in growing my career. I was starting to have a lot of early wins and successes, and getting a chance to speak and be a part of conferences. And I was asked to host a conference, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do really well at doing this. And I was one of those kids who I didn't like group projects. So I tried to do it all myself instead of working with a team and delegating and trusting them to do those things, And so we hosted this big conference. We had like 500 people show up, and we get done, and I come home, and that night my back gives out. And it was like, I remember calling my parents and like, you need to take me to the hospital. I can't move. I'm in excruciating. Like, I'm crying on the phone because I hurt so bad. And my parents were like, we'll come over and somehow I managed to get myself out of the bed. I felt like I just flung myself off onto the floor and then like inched myself up the wall and kind of got dressed a little bit. And I can't move. I can't bend. My back is just, and finally, like my parents were like, well, let's just, before we take you to the ER, let's maybe, my mom had one of those old school heating pads that like you were afraid that you might catch the house on fire if you didn't pay attention to it.
Yep.
And so I'm laying in the in their recliner with this heating pad, taking some extreme Tylenol. And I remember falling asleep, and I wake up the next morning. My back's not hurting as bad, but I mean, I was in a no good state. And a good friend of mine, Mike Coffey, texted me a couple of days later because I had shared on Facebook what was going on, and he goes, Kevin, you need to learn to say no sometimes. He's like, you're very much like me. You want to do so many things, and that creates physical burnout, which I wasn't aware that was a thing.
Absolutely. Wow.
And so I find so many leaders who are in similar situations to you and I, who they don't have the emotional burnout, but it's the physical burnout because they work too hard. And I know now that that's where you spend a lot of your time trying to help leaders and high achievers who find themselves in that realm of burnout. And so as you're working with those leaders, those achievers, how are you helping them navigate that burnout phase?
So interestingly enough, I think the first piece, and this is so interesting because we hear a lot from addiction experts, right? We hear about identifying that you have a problem being really the first phase. And I know because of my background that I didn't think I had a problem. And a lot of, when we're talking about leaders and high achievers, a lot of our mindset is, I think it's a twofold problem. One is that I know for me, I was the pillar for my clients. I was the pillar for my staff. So I felt that even when I didn't feel well, even when this problem or that problem, I always had to be fine. And that's, you have to put that face on, right? You can't roll into work like, I don't really think I want to be here today, right? When you have a staff, you just can't do it. I think it's frowned upon in the leadership. I haven't read that book that says that that's okay. So I think a lot of it is it's not okay to not be okay when you are a leader or a high achiever, when you're in those roles, when you're in the C-suite, there's so much that you feel like relies on you that it's not okay to not be okay. So that's the first part, is even acknowledging that there may be a problem. That is probably, I would say that is the area that I am able to contribute to the most, because that was my mindset. I mean, I faced some crazy challenges. Like this health piece has been a huge challenge, but throughout my life, it just sort of feels like I've had to restart 4 or 5 times, like things would be take off and then that didn't go the way it was planned, right? And do it again. And so I felt like I was pretty tough. And so when things started happening, my mindset was burnout is like, that's not for people like me. Like, I don't do that. It really was this overinflated sense of that I was too tough to get burnt out. In hindsight, that is now comical to me. Like looking at myself, I'm like, really? Like you thought you could, but when you're mentally tough, there's so much that you are able to do. That's why we hear these stories of, the craziest things. I was just reading about some of these examples of like someone who froze to death because they got locked in a refrigerated truck, but the refrigeration wasn't turned on. But because in their mind, they were going to die because they were locked in a refrigerated truck, they died with all of the symptoms of having been locked in a refrigerated truck, that the refrigeration was not turned on. And our mind can do some things to our bodies that are just, and the other one that really blew my mind, same book, was someone who was taking a medication. They were in a clinical trial. They had the placebo. So they were taking sugar pills, got mad at his girlfriend, downed the whole bottle, wound up in the hospital with all of the symptoms of an overdose, but he overdosed on sugar pills. Because his mind told him that he had taken that medication, he went into this state of overdose. He literally overdosed on sugar pills. I mean, the things our mind can do to our body is just, I mean, it's spectacular. And think about it in reverse, like if we're going to use that for good, right? When I'm coaching people on performance, like when we're talking about that, like let's use that for good. But that mindset of I'm too tough for burnout, like, oh, I'll make sure my staff doesn't get burned out. But that mindset, because I couldn't connect to the fact that it could happen to me because I'm so tough, I've been through so much, like I can handle this. What I was actually doing was overriding systems that are meant to protect us. And I remember I had to go a week at a time to a clinic out of state, sometimes 2 weeks at a time. So think about that. You're running a company, but you've got to leave for a week or two at a time, go out of state to spend, every day in the clinic, no phones allowed. So I couldn't even, I couldn't message, I couldn't do anything. I would sneak every once in a while, don't tell the clinic. And I remember the doctor there looking at some reports and saying, I've never seen this before. And I was like, what, just give it to me straight. And he was like, no, you don't understand. I said, your body is not even making energy. I was like, right, I know, I'm exhausted all the time. Like, that's why I'm here. And he said to me, no, you really don't understand. You are living on adrenaline, sheer adrenaline. I was like, oh, thank goodness for adrenaline. Like, that was my mindset. Like, well, at least I got it. And he said, you're killing yourself. You can't, do you understand what that's doing to your heart? Which I'm now, I have a test next week, checking up on my heart. Like, I did damage because my mindset was tired, but I'm going to push through. And he's like, you can't be on full adrenaline just because it's a Tuesday. My thought was, well, you better figure out what's wrong, because I'm going to keep doing this until you figure it out. Just not smart, right? Like, this is not the healthy path.
Right.
But it is the path of a lot of people in challenging jobs and in leadership. That is the path, because you're going to find a way to push through. So I want to help people push through in a healthy way, still get to those goals, still do all the things that they want to do, but let's do it, maybe let's do it without actually completely wrecking our hearts. That's the plan.
That sounds like a good plan, yeah, it definitely starts with that self-reflection. I mean, as you said, I was the problem. I couldn't help but think of Taylor Swift. Hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. And because I like when that song came out and I heard those lyrics and go, that resonates a little too close to home. And as leaders, we do push through, and there is this American leadership mindset that you have to put on this front, this face, to not show emotion, to not show weakness, because you have to lead people. And it is killing us. You look at the health crisis. There are other things that play into some of the health crisis factors, but a lot of it is this physical burnout that is leading to massive chronic issues that it's killing us as a society.
Even so, there's a lot of science behind the connection between, well, certainly chronic stress and weight issues, which can be drastically losing weight, gaining weight, and despite a healthy diet and exercise, because of things that can happen with cortisol and with those. But the connection between chronic stress and diabetes Heart conditions, certainly, I can testify to that. But another really spectacular study that I've really been keeping an eye on is connection between chronic stress and cognitive disorders later on in life. So basically, we're doing so much and staying so busy, and it's leading to pretty severe cognitive issues for the elderly. And that, to me, that's always really a scary one. And then a really interesting study. It's a little controversial, particularly in the US, but this connection between chronic stress and cancer, because the chronic stress puts us into our bodies into an acidic state, and cancer thrives in an acidic state. So if we're not keeping our bodies alkaline, not to get too much into all the science of it, but when I'm thinking of these things, I'm thinking, wow, I started on this mission to help other people not go through what I went through, that they can have sustainable success and happy lives. That's what I want people to recognize, that it is possible. That's my goal. So identify it and then recognize that it can be changed. It's not impossible. You don't have to quit your corporate job and move to a deserted island to have all of these things. So that's my mission. But then when I thought, this is so much bigger than that, that's a huge mission. But when I started saying, is this the cancer preventative? Is this how we are going to work on diabetes? Is this how we're going to work on, cognitive problems for the elderly? Like, it has grown so much in all of the studying and training that I've done to recognize this is connected to so much more than I even realized when I started on my own health journey. It's crazy.
It's crazy, and it's so interesting to see all those correlations and how we're trying to solve those things, and there is a shift, especially in American culture. It's a slow shift, but it's still a shift, and it at least looks like a positive direction of recognizing this idea of being more holistic with our health. It's not just the physical, but the emotional and the mental and the spiritual and all those other things that kind of go with it. Because if one gets out of balance, it does have an impact on all the other things. And I know for you, as you kind of start working through with leaders, you're helping to identify for them those things. And so it's kind of love for you kind of talk through the people that you're working with and getting them to a healthier state. What does that process look like for you? But maybe for somebody who's listening, going, I can do some of this as well.
So I have some, it's really kind of funny that I'm not funny that you ask it, but I'm chuckling because some of these things that I present when I do like a corporate workshop are seemingly so simple, but the way that I present them, I have everyone set goals. They choose them. I give some options, some ideas. They choose them. They write them out. They write how they're going to implement them. And then we do a revisit in 30 days. And you would be blown away by how many of these things that I'm about to share will say, I know I should have been doing that. I didn't realize how much I wasn't doing it until we made this challenge, and then we had follow-up and accountability. And so once people identify, I am working all the time, I'm not getting enough sleep, I'm stressed, my spouse and we're not getting along, I'm snappy with my children, I'm not in the physical shape I want to be, whatever, however it's impacting. And to be honest, one of the biggest impacts, and I've seen all kinds of things, people losing chunks of hair, skin rashes. The way that stress manifests in the body, it's different for everyone, but it's some of the most bizarre things can happen. But when it's identified that it's tied to stress, adding one more thing to someone's life who is already stressed out and already burnt out and already has too much to do is not my goal. Right? I don't want to say, oh, here's 15 new health and wellness things that you now need to be good at on top of being, a great husband, father, CEO, and you're working on your golf game, right? Like I
Right.
don't want to add one more thing. So I'm developing these methods and how do I help people without putting more on their plate? And so some of the things that I give and you're good. I'm chuckling, you're gonna chuckle. Start with hydration. It sounds so basic as we're sitting here drinking our beers. We'll have a water after.
Yes. Yes.
But there's studies that say that that our brain performance decreases 70% when we're dehydrated. Do you know what percentage of the population is typically hydrated? It's, I think, somewhere in the 70 to 80%. We live our lives dehydrated. So rather than adding 50 things on that you need to start today, let's start tracking our water intake. Get a water bottle you love. I was commenting on it's important to have a glass that you like. Get a water bottle that you like. I don't care if you already have 50. How does it feel in your hand? How do you like carrying it? Does it fit in the side pocket of your bag? You always say, does it fit in the cup holder of your car? Get a water bottle that you're like, that you're connected to. And it sounds crazy, but how does it feel in your hand? I have my favorite coffee mug. I have my favorite water bottle. When you start hydrating, because a big symptom of long-term stress, burnout, is cognitive, lack of concentration, the difficulty assimilating new information, and feeling just a general sense of being scatterbrained, right? I'm going 100 miles an hour, but I'm not going any one direction. So when we just simply increasing our water intake, which is something we can all do, that is a huge jump in the right direction. Another one that's seemingly simple is our sleep routines. A lot of data that supports going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time. I remember waking up in the morning, if my laptop is open, binders, books, right? I would literally fall asleep working because I would stay up till 3 a.m. because I got to finish this for tomorrow. When we are stressed and when we have a lot to do, our natural tendency is to sleep less. I can create more hours in my day if I just cut out a few hours of sleep. I'll stay up till 3, or I'll get up at 4 instead of 6 because that gives me 2 extra hours. The science says that cutting out our sleep makes us perform on a lower level. So we actually accomplish the same amount in a day, even though we cut out some of our sleep. So another thing I'm a big fan of when we're talking about easy things that your listeners can start right away is going to bed at the same time, getting up at the same time. But one step further, Alexa in my house, but I know she's
I'm still in a song on Amazon.
No, Alexa, dismiss. She was playing music. I won't say her name again. My house is very,
connected. Yes.
Yeah. And she cuts down my lights 30 minutes before it's time for me to go to sleep, so that I'm adjusting. Screens are off, not on my phone, not on my laptop, and she starts dimming the lights so that my body understands I'm calming down and I'm going to bed. It's so easy, right? And what's her name? We'll take care of that for you, right? So these are simple things. This is my method. These are the things that I teach. And rather than saying, I want you in the gym 6 times a week, I want you to, let's start with these simple things. Let's start with some breathing. Let's add a walk every day. And you can listen to a book on that walk. You can multitask, right? So, or if you've got a boring work meeting, walk. Wait, if you don't have to be on video, put the headset in, do some laps. I mean, we can find ways that the high achievers, the leaders who are slammed, can add little things throughout their day that aren't difficult, but will skyrocket their performance and begin chipping away at the potential damage that they've done, that we have done to our bodies by thinking that we're invincible.
I love how simple that is. And it's funny, you mentioned water, sleep, and getting, good exercise and just doing some of those simple things to create efficiencies. It's not hard. I mean, I think about, like I told you beforehand, I had a Navy SEAL who came on the podcast who had a gallon of water and he drinks that a day. And I think about it. Yeah, I try to track my water intake to make sure that I stay hydrated. I've seen it firsthand where dehydration has, impacted somebody's cognitive skills to a point where it's like, yeah, you're not making smart decisions, but not correlating it to dehydration until, oh, we're at the emergency room and they go, you're dehydrated. Let's put some IV and get you some fluids. This will help you think better. Oh, well, that makes perfect sense, you know?
And when we're go, 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 those are the things that go out the window. Remembering to drink the water, getting enough sleep, and eating healthy meals. When I teach about, eating a little healthier, I don't say, okay, we're putting on this really strict diet. And I say, let's set a goal to eat one healthy meal a day. Because I know when I was go, 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 lunch, if I wasn't having lunch with a client, then lunch was DoorDash delivered to my office that I'm eating while I'm working, trying to get it all down before my next Zoom because I didn't want to be eating on Zoom. Like that was the mindset, not what am I eating, but how quickly can I get it here and eat it before my next thing. This is an easy fix, right? This is a really easy fix.
Yeah. It's so simple, and it definitely plays into like how important routines are to things. I laughed. There was an episode of Seinfeld, and I don't know if you saw this one or if you watched Seinfeld growing up, but Kramer, in trying to always do something crazy, it's like, hey, I can impact my productivity by only sleeping 3 hours a day. And what he would do is like, time it for 15-minute power naps and then keep going.
Yeah.
And eventually by the end of the episode, he was just so out of it and not doing well at all. It's like, no, you can't do that. 8 hours. Yeah. I'm very guarded with my sleep. I mean, there are times where I can't, but yeah, I go to bed at the same time every night. And my dogs wake me up at the same time every morning. So we've got a routine.
Yep. You can't really tell what they are. My two dogs are pictured behind me, or at least they're silhouettes. And they are the best alarm clocks on every 7 days a week.
Yes. My youngest, who sleeps with me in the bed, she gets me up at 5:30 every morning saying it's time to go outside and I'm ready for breakfast. And I'm like, I'm not. I'd like another 30 minutes, but okay, we're going to get up and get going.
So for your listeners, you just said something that is just gold. I don't even know if you realized that you said it, but you said, I'm good with my sleep schedule. It can't always be like that. And I think that that's where a lot of misconception comes in when we try to start changing our lives, is that we do something for a little bit and then something happens in life that's unavoidable. And then we get a little off kilter. And then it's sort of like, oh, well, I tried that already. And I think that what you said, it can't always be like that. And that is really a mindset that we have to, as achievers, right? As driven people, like for me, I'm very all or nothing, right? Like if I'm doing it all the way, because I'll feel like a failure if I skip a day, right? So whatever the thing is, right? Whatever. And that is the achiever's mindset. When you're a high performer, that is how you function. That's how you think. And so for me, a lot of my healing, physical as well as my change in my mindset has been that it's not even so much, and yes, I have to give myself grace, and we hear a lot about that, but it's really a better understanding of that there are seasons of life. So there's a season to go hard, but that season isn't a 12-month season, right? There's a time.
Right.
I come from, the accounting industry, and when I worked in accounting firms before I went the advisory direction, there are seasons, right? If you're an accountant and you're tax season or whatever, like there are seasons, and you go hard during that season, but you have to recognize there are seasons. There's that time cannot be a lifetime. And right. I was living that season. The hustle season was every week, every day, every year for many years. And, there are times I'll share this brief story, but I had to speak 2 days for a seminar. It was my seminar. I was the seminar speaker. So there wasn't like calling someone I know who's in my field, getting them to fill in. It was my seminar. I was speaking 8 hours, 2 days in a row. And people had paid to come to my seminar. Talk about pressure, right?
Right.
I got pneumonia. like the day, possibly 2 days before I was sick, the day before I was in the doctor's office. And I said, look, here's the thing. I'm doing this seminar. I'm not canceling tonight. I'm doing it. Give me a steroid shot and an inhaler. I promise I'll rest after. Now, was that the smartest thing to do with pneumonia? Probably not. But I knew, and I had built into my schedule already, I knew that I would be exhausted after doing 2 days. So I had built in the next day as a day off. So it was a Wednesday, Thursday seminar, Friday's off, I have the weekend. So I said, look, doc, shoot me up with some steroids, give me an inhaler so I can breathe. And I promise you, I will rest after. And that's the story that I always go back to when I'm kind of trying to talk to people about seasons. There may be times where the thing that needs to happen from a work or career standpoint that you've got to push a little bit. I don't recommend just getting shot up with steroids and pushing through, but as an example, there are times that, you know, it may be that was a crazy time. Like we had this is the week, but as long as we recognize that that's meant to be a season, and then we need to resume those things that we had built in place, I think that's the really big separation for a high performer who wants to do the thing that they're working on. They want to do it at 110%, and it needs to be perfect every single day. That is our mindset. So this shift that was transformative for me. I mean, that was earth shattering for me to recognize there's a season that you go hard or go home. And there is actually then the season of, and you just do go home.
Right.
So if you chose go hard on that one, go hard or go home, then the next season you choose go home and get some rest before you try to go hard again. And I don't know why that was such a difficult concept, but wow, now that I've learned it, it has completely changed my life. So hopefully that is helpful for your listeners to start saying, well, maybe this is a season. Maybe this is a season of go hard. And maybe I need to look at wrapping up this season.
No, I think that's great advice. And I completely view my world and the things that I do in seasons. Like, okay, I've got, it's football season. For football players, okay, I have to perform for this time period. And then there's the off season where I can rest. I'm still practicing my craft, but I'm not having to go as hard. And then I'm building myself back up with the preseason to perform through the actual season itself. And I think as leaders, as high performers, high achievers, we have to kind of have that same mindset is, okay, yes, there's going to be a period where I am working really hard because that's the season for that. And I can kind of scale up. But when I'm done out of that season, I need to allow myself to rest and recover, recharge, and reflect on, okay, what worked, what didn't, how do I get ready for the next season? But also taking that time to go, you know what? I worked hard. I do need some time to rest. I mean, you look at professional athletes when they get to the off season, they disappear for 2 or 3 weeks at a time because they just need to rest. And I think while it would be nice for all of us to go, hey, I'm going to take 2 or 3 weeks off and just disappear and go sit on a beach and drink my water and my, coconut drink.
Yeah, drink that water.
And just sit on the beach and rest before I move forward. I mean, it's your body will force you into a sabbatical if you don't do it yourself.
Yes. What is that saying? If you don't make time for your wellness, you'll have to make time for your illness.
Yeah.
Living proof, right? And that was such a brilliant analogy. Thank you for that. Can I use that one?
Sure, absolutely.
What's really bizarre is, so before my accounting firm, I co-founded a boarding school for gifted athletes, and we helped, every week D1 coaches were coming in recruiting, and I had opportunity to work with several professional athletes. So the fact that I never made that correlation about season and off season, like, I don't know how I missed it, but you just gave me that one, and I'm
There you go.
absolutely going to use it. So I'll credit you for it.
There you go. There you go.
You'll be in the book. Absolutely.
There we go.
But that is the absolute truth, is that, and professional athletes, they are some of the highest, from a physical standpoint, the highest performance people that we will see. And they too have to have an off season. It's, the example that I've been using, and I'm absolutely going to use yours because it's way better. But whenever we're really critical, when there's something major going on in the country, which, by the way, when is there not something major happening?
We're always in crisis mode now. It seems
like whether it's in our country or another country, there's always something happening in the world. And then the president, whatever president it is, will be criticized because they were playing golf. And I used to feel that way. Like, dude, you're the president of the United States of America. Like, there's some things happening. And now I am able to recognize we want our president playing as much golf as possible. Like, everyone needs that mental break. Like, how brilliant, I don't know if this happens to you, but how brilliant are you on vacation?
Oh, I come up with some of the best things.
Best ideas I've ever had in my life.
I was talking with our friend Eric Meck recently, and I told him a story. I said, I had applied for a job at Deloitte because I wanted, of the big three consultings, Deloitte was the one that I wanted to go work for. And in their benefits package, I uncovered they actually have a sabbatical for their employees. And depending on how long you work there, depends on how long you get. But it can be a paid, 3 to 6 months off to allow their employees to rest, recharge, work on other projects so that they can come back with new ideas and new challenges during that time of no pressure of I have to go do all of these things. It's being taken care of for me. And like, I'm not out of a job. I'm not having to worry. Like, I come back and I'm in that role, but I've had that time to rest, recover, and build things, whatever it may be. And when I go on vacation, I learn so much. Like, oh, I thought about this or this, or I laughed. Our good friends Brian and Gab, like, playing with Legos, and I'm like, okay, where were y'all growing up? Like, why are y'all just now getting into Legos? Like, this has been a thing for a while. I'm glad you found it, but even now, like, I love puzzles and building things because that it gives my mind something to do, and I'm coming up with new ideas in a space where I'm just having fun.
Here, the nerd in me is just screaming out to say there is data. I love my data, right? I'm a numbers girl. That supports that when we're doing childlike things like Legos, things that we did when we were younger, that the amount of creativity that brings up in us simply by going back and doing something like coloring or playing with, blocks or puzzles, it is an extraordinary tool. And so when I heard that, I was like, I'm about to be genius. Let me get my coloring book. Like, it's amazing how these things that I can admit that I may have been judgmental about in the past are actually some of the most brilliant things. And when you start spending time, just because of where I am in my life, I have, and my most recent company that I had opportunities to spend a lot of time with brilliant people, wealthy people, creative people. And when you start observing these behaviors and your mind starts to shift from what we've been taught, I think I'm maybe a little bit older than you, but I imagine we were raised a little bit the same in that, work for what you want and you can have anything, right? The American dream, that mindset that's instilled in us. And when you start getting around people who have done it differently and have learned to have a great life and also have found success, and you're finding oh, they're not working 100 hours a week. What is going on? You know, it shifts your worldview. And so, you know, and then you get into things like, you know, playing with Legos and finding out that that is a way to be brilliant. Playing with Legos is a way to be brilliant.
Right.
It's so interesting. Again, you know, I'm really, this is me being vulnerable saying, I didn't know these things. This is all new information that I've come across because I got sick. Getting sick and my life completely coming to a halt, giving up my company was quite possibly the best thing that could ever happen to me because of the wealth of information that I've uncovered that I may not have if I continued down the same path that I was on. If I had continued, I'm not sure I would still be alive, if I'm being perfectly honest. The doctors were telling me, if you don't slow down, you will die. And I'd maybe pause briefly, but I would keep going and really wind up ramping back up to the same pace that I had been at. I'm not sure I would even be alive today if those things hadn't happened. And now look where we are. We're talking about these things that are just next level when it comes to performance. I mean, crazy stuff. Great. Absolutely spectacular.
Absolutely. Well, Amanda, it is time for last call. And so for our listeners this week, what is something that they can be doing to be a better leader?
I think that this is, I want to share so much information, right? But I want to get to the heart of a leader. You're in that position because you are driven, because you are a high achiever. So we already know that. That's already been established. And I would say my encouragement for the week would be, you're pouring out to your staff, you're pouring out to your clients, your boss is impressed. Taking a step back and thinking about what's next for your career, because high achievers, we're always thinking about what's next. What is it? Is it that promotion within that company? Is it launching the next company? Whatever it is, think about what's next for your career. What is your goal? And then pause for a moment and picture yourself, you as a person, in that new role, in that next thing, that next level thing you're working on. What do you look like? How do you feel? When I did that exercise at the beginning of my journey, the person I saw was not the person I want to be. She was tired, she was aged, she was running ragged. Now when I see that person, she's vibrant, she's happy, but I did the work to get to that place. And so I think before considering doing the work, absolutely start with the hydration, absolutely start with looking at your sleep schedule. But the very first thing you can do is envision who you want to be when you hit that next goal. And look at that person and say, what things need to happen for me to be that person? And then that's where you start from.
I love it. That is great advice. Amanda, thank you so much for sharing your story, your wisdom with us. How can our listeners connect with you, learn more about you? If somebody goes, hey, this resonates with me and I want to bring you in to work with our team, how can they connect with you?
Absolutely. I am a lover of LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn daily. So I would love for your listeners to connect with me, send me a message and say, hey, you know, I heard you. And so I think that's an important, let me know that you heard me from Kevin's show. I would love to hear from you. And then of course, my website, amandaludwig.com, or increase.expert, which is my business advisory firm for those entrepreneurs out there looking for the entrepreneurial tips that are meshed in with how to be a great entrepreneur from a wholeness standpoint and how to be a great entrepreneur from a financial standpoint.
Thank you. That's great. Amanda, thank you so much for joining me for a pint in conversation. I actually did finish.
Oh,
I told
you I wasn't going to let you drink alone, but I think I've got a ways to go.
I did finish the Pumpkinhead. I mean, it was good. I enjoyed it. Definitely won't be something that I ordered, but I'm glad I picked it up, especially knowing that you are from Maine. I had to pick up a Maine beer, and who knew that it would be a brewery that you've actually been to.
That is crazy.
And But thank you for joining me. I appreciate your friendship and your time and sharing with our listeners all the great things that you shared today.
Thank you. It's been an absolute honor.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you for listening to the Leaders and Loggers podcast. If you loved what you heard today, send this episode to a leader that you know that, hey, you need to hear this. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. We're on all the major streaming platforms as well on YouTube. And join us next week for another pint in conversation.